Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and I am delighted to introduce our special guest today, Robert Vedder. Bob is a healer and soul coach who utilizes a combination of Indigenous-inspired and Western methods to co-create lasting change for everyday modern problems. As a cultural anthropologist, Bob conducted fieldwork on healing practices among the Southern Plains tribes of Oklahoma. He was adopted into a family of Comanche people by Oliver Pataponi, the last medicine man of his tribe. Later, he co-authored the book Big Bow, The Spiritual Life and Teachings of a Kiowa Family, along with his adopted uncle and Kiowa medicine man, Richard Tartza. His later work took him to Mexico to learn the practice of curanderismo, the traditional healing system of ancient Mesoamerica. Today, Bob combines Indigenous-inspired methods of ceremony, altar work connected to archetypal symbols, soul retrieval, and spiritual cleansing, along with the modern techniques of neo-Ericksonian hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming, otherwise known as NLP. Bob teaches workshops on healing, offers private one-on-one work primarily for healers, and hosts an awesome podcast titled Healing and Spirituality in World Cultures. And Bob, I am so fascinated and intrigued with this work and really excited to have you here with us today. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Vered. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
So how about we start with, what do you mean by healing? So when we say spirituality and healing, what kind of healing are you referring to?
Yeah, that's a good question because it means something different, I think, to everyone. So what it means to me is coming to wholeness, a state of wholeness. And it's important that we understand that there's a difference between curing an illness and healing. Because a person might have a physical illness, be healed and not cured, and a person might be cured of a physical illness and not healed. So it has to do with our sense of self, who we are, how we act in the world, the relationship that I have with myself, with the people around me, with the earth below me, with the sky above me, including my spiritual notions of a creator, if I believe that there is one, my connection with everything. So in a way, we could say that healing has to do with restoring relationship.
Thank you. And, in preparation for this episode, I did a little bit of research on like spirituality and healing from kind of the medical perspective. And I came across a Harvard article, Harvard Medical School article that really they said, the professor there said, we just can't afford to ignore the potential effect that spirituality has and religion on health, because there's so much research now that kind of sees things, right? Over 3,000 studies indicating that spirituality does have a beneficial effect. And so tell us a little bit about your work. Like what have you learned that can help people to heal, whether it's mentally, emotionally, physically, or some might say spiritually?
Yeah, so one of the things that I do in my one-on-one work is in the first session that I have with someone, I'll ask them what their spiritual or religious beliefs are. And honestly, it doesn't matter to me what they are, because part of what I do is to encourage them to bring that into the work that we do, into what we co-create. Because your sense of what is bigger than you is incredibly important to your growth and your personal change. So if you believe that there are powers out there, and I don't care whether it's an animistic spirit, a God up in heaven, or an architect of this universe that operates like a watch, whatever your belief is, if we can engage that into the work that we do, it becomes that much more powerful because you're relying on a power that is greater than you.
And some people listening might say, well, Bob, isn't that just the placebo effect, right? If they believe it, then it's more likely to actually help them heal. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, my thoughts about the placebo effect are that it is the most underrated, incredibly miraculous thing on the planet. So, my belief, and this is, I think, a helpful belief, is that all healing is self healing. So, if you and I work together, I'm just here to facilitate the work that you do that is self healing. Now, that has a positive aspect and what some people might construe as a negative aspect. And the reason goes back to what my first teacher, La Golondrina, said, which is they all want magic. And what she meant by that was that all of her clients or patients wanted her to be able to stand over them and wave a magic wand and have them immediately be fixed. And that is not the nature of the work at all. The nature of the work is that I'm working with you in order for you to make apparent, make obvious, make concrete something that has been going on with you in terms of your self-imposed limitations up until that moment. And in the process, to re-examine it and to change it. You know, your podcast is about mindset, and mindset is at the core of healing, because most of us have taken on beliefs that served us for a time but no longer do. So as a child, you heard something, you internalized it, you left it operating in the background. It's like an app on a phone that's just been using up memory in the background, and you don't even know that it's there, but somehow it's stealing from the totality. So all healing is self-healing, and the placebo effect means that that can have profound physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual effects on your life. Now, usually when people say that's just the placebo effect, what they're saying is, oh, if I take this sugar pill, I could be healed of something. Well, wonderful. What could be better than that? What could be better than to know that I have the ability, I have the built-in, evolutionarily determined mechanism within me to change everything. And if it takes a sugar pill to do it, I think that's the best thing I've ever heard.
I agree with you. And I just love the fact that you're bringing the power back in the hands of our listeners and viewers, because my experience, having used at this point over a dozen techniques for what we might call healing or increasing performance or increasing more inner ease, whatever that is that the person is desiring in their life, is that it really doesn't matter what technique. It really doesn't matter, because it is the person that is doing the work with him or herself, because the unconscious mind has a blueprint for their perfect health. And so when a permission is given to do that, when it's safe and appropriate to do that, the body will heal itself. Our job is maybe, as to do this for ourselves or for others, is maybe to release some of the blockages that might be limiting that from happening. But it really is about empowerment, because everyone has the power within themselves. They don't need the thing, if you will, to do that. Although it does help to have assistance, guidance from others. We do know that is true. So
Exactly. It's all about personal responsibility.
tell us more about that.
Yeah, so if you come to me and you want me to wave a magic wand, that means that you've given your sense of agency to me. But if I work with you and we determine what it is, what the blockages have been, determine what they are and find a way to remove them, the work is on your shoulders. It's your personal responsibility with my guidance in order to create that change.
Thank you. So share with us, because I know just from having listened to conversations that you've had, reading things, that you have had the privilege of being with individuals that have uh, and cultures that have knowledge and wisdom that's been passed down through the generations, just timeless wisdom. And what are some of those things that are really important for people to know about their own power and what is possible for them? And also share with us what is the work? Like, what do you do?
Well, let me tell you a story, if that's okay. So you mentioned in my bio that I was adopted as a young man by an old man named Oliver Patapony, who was the last medicine man of the Comanches. Now, the story of how he came to be a medicine man is a fascinating one, and if I had a little more time with you, I would tell that entire story. Um, but let's suffice it to say, in summary, that he had what he was told was terminal cancer, and that he went on something that anthropologists call a vision quest. And in this vision that he had, that he only went on this personal ceremony because the doctors had told him that his time was up. He went out of total desperation. But he had a transformative experience that included fire. I'll leave it at that because it's a longer story than I have. Now, his method of he was healed by fire of the cancer. And what he told me was that sickness is like a fire, and you've got to fight fire with fire. So in his doctoring practices, what he would do is he would build a fire and let the fire burn down to red hot coals. And then he would reach into the fire and take a coal out in his fingers and put it in his mouth. And that would activate his ability to doctor or heal another person. Now, the story that I wanted to tell you is what he told me about what he saw when he was a boy. When he was a boy, now he was born, we don't even know exactly when he was born because they didn't keep birth records back then, but he was either born in the late 1800s or maybe around the year 1900. So he, when he was a boy, remembered watching these old men at that time, who you got to figure, were born way back in the 1800s. And what he remembered seeing was he told me that he would be present and he would watch these healers do incredible things. And one of the things that he mentioned that he thought was so amazing was, he said, and I watched one day as this old man, he built a fire and then he raked out the coals and then he walked across the coals before he doctored somebody. And he said to me, "Isn't that amazing?" And I said, "Yeah, it's amazing, but I think it's more amazing that you could take one out of the fire and put it in your mouth." And this is what he said to me. He said, "I never thought there was anything strange about putting a coal in my mouth, but I sure couldn't believe that guy could walk across those coals." And I tell you that story because, again, we're coming back to mindset. And we're coming back to what happens when we watch something truly amazing happen. And what it does is maybe that's what engages that placebo effect, is to see something that is absolutely amazing. To see something happen that violates our sense of what's possible. Because it makes us say, well, if that's possible, then maybe this change in my life is equally possible. Does that make sense?
It does. In my mind, thank you for the story. And my mind is going to, all right, so we can have that evidence of what's possible in the world around us, right? By seeing other people do the miraculous, or by us actually having some miraculous experience that we cannot explain, if you will, through our, logical, analytical mind. And what if imagining ourselves in the future doing the thing that we right now might not believe is fully possible, let's say if we have some doubt, if that through repetition, right, really imagining being in the future, right, like mentally rehearsing, right, experiencing that fully, if that can create enough of the evidence for us to believe that it's possible. So we might not have to see a healer walk on fire or put coal in his mouth, but we can do that for ourselves through the power of our mind.
Sure, and that's what we do. You mentioned NLP earlier. That's what we do in NLP. And the version of it in curanderismo that one of my teachers said was, she said, what we do is we go with the client and we imagine the future where X is accomplished. Then we stand at that moment of X and we look back and say, how did I get here? Maybe it's as simple as that.
That's awesome. And so, what can our listeners do, right? Like actual practical things that they can begin to do to maybe create a little momentum around releasing some things that are no longer serving them, or bringing more of the feeling of the future, right? Into their life. What specifically can we do?
Well, I'm gonna put this on your shoulders, Vered. I'm gonna work with you for a moment, and we're gonna pick something in your life to create for yourself. And the reason that this is important, and the reason that this is great for every listener, is the following. What I say is that every time you experience another person's healing, what happens is you get hit by healing shrapnel. And that might seem like a really strange metaphor. And on one level it is, because shrapnel usually means something that kills somebody else, you get hurt by it. We're kind of doing the reverse of that, which is if something good happens to somebody else, then you receive the goodness from that. And maybe it's as simple as sharing in something that's universal. So if there's something that seems strange and exotic about all of this on one level, on another level, it's not. On another level, it's looking at, what is my situation? How would I like to change it? What are the obstacles that have stood in the way? And very important in that, including the emotions surrounding it that I want to shift. And how can I move from that into this realm of possibility? Now, superimpose on that the specific beliefs, the religious beliefs, the spiritual beliefs, the cultural practices, the tools of healing. All of those things can change from culture to culture. We use symbols, we manipulate symbols and use them in that healing process. So there's something that is universal about this that applies to everyone and every situation, that then has a cultural imprint and then individualized based on your experience. So if I take you through this mini process, anybody listening can envision themselves, how would this apply to my situation? How could I do something similar to that in my life?
Thank you,
So if
Bob.
you're game, let's give it a shot.
I am game. Thank you. And I know we had a conversation earlier about the possibility of doing this. I already have something in mind that I wish to have more ease around in my life. And what you said is really true around that, kind of shrapnel effect, of getting help by witnessing other people getting help. I had a wonderful guest on the show. Her name is Lynn McTaggart, and she does research on group intention. She does these intention experiments. And of course, the listeners are welcome to check that episode out as well. And what she found out, and there's ample research now proving that this is absolutely true, is that when we have an intention for somebody else, seeing them as whole and healed, so to speak, as in their most empowered, resourceful, full self, that not only does that have an actual effect on accelerating the healing for the person whom they are sending that intention for, but also, of course, on themselves, which was the fascinating part of the research. So thank you. And if it's in service of others, I'm happy to play, and hopefully everyone will get something from it.
Wonderful. And I agree 100% with what Lynn McTaggart said there, and I'm somewhat familiar with her work. So yeah, right on track. All right, Vered, give me a quick overview of what it is that you would like to shift.
So I feel like I'm at a crossroads because I have a business. It's a coaching training business, and thankfully we have a lot of work. The team is growing, and I'm at the point of like, okay, do I want to make this bigger? Because I know I can. So I've done a lot of work on beliefs, and I know that I can absolutely, myself and the team can achieve anything. Yes, really, there are no limitations. I believe that to be true. But do I want it? So there's a little bit of resistance, and I think my highest value is freedom. And so my fear, I think that really is it. There's a fear that if this business gets bigger, or significantly bigger, then I will lessen the level of freedom that I have in my life. Freedom meaning to do what I want, when I want, how I want, where I want, right? Because I'll have this kind of burden of, managing people who manage this bigger business. So that's kind of where I am at.
So there's a couple of ways that we could work with that. So what would happen if you had less freedom? What would that mean to you in your life?
Less freedom would feel more like constricted, right? I can even sense it in my body language now. It just feels like the word that's coming up is death, like a little bit of a death. Like parts of me would be dying because they won't get to be free and soar and have adventures and do whatever they want to do.
Wonderful. All right, so a couple of ways that I could work with you. One is a four-step process that goes along with the four directions in on an altar that we would create. So I would demonstrate to you how to create it, and then you would make it with yours. So there are four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. We also say that there are four guardians, and each direction has its guardian. And everybody does this a little bit differently, but in the particular curanderismo altar that I use, the four positions start in the east with a new beginning. And if we go counterclockwise, the next position is the north, which is our shadow self, the things that create a blind spot for us that others might notice, but we don't. Then to the west, we have a guardian that is what's called the flayed skin. And what it has to do with is releasing whatever no longer serves us, including beliefs, limiting beliefs. And then finally, we go to the south, which is the direction of the hummingbird. And the hummingbird is this amazing symbol, a creature that does the impossible, a creature that can hover, that can go backwards, can go forwards, and scientists tell us it shouldn't be able to fly. And so that's where we take this and we attempt to do the impossible through the power of human will and intention. So you and I would go through all of those four stages, maybe one session entirely for each one. That's one way that we could work. Another way that we could work that I'm going to do with you right now, that maybe is a little bit simpler and a little bit faster, is we would examine your belief and we would take it to the east and to the west. So here's what we're going to do, and it looks like we have enough time to do this. The belief that I have written down for you, and you can tell me how this lands. Tell me if when you hear this, if it really lands with you and you feel it in your body. If I expand my business, that means that I will have less freedom in my life. And that means that I will feel a sense of death.
Yes, it feels correct. It's like there's some parts of me that are saying, no, don't do it. So
So let's examine that. We've got three different positions here, three different statements. We could change any of them. We could change one, but we're going to bring it to the power of the West and then the power of the East to shift it. So if I expand, I will experience less freedom. And that, so we could either look at it that we're going to change the freedom part, the definition of what freedom is, or change the third position on death or dying. So real quickly, which one of those would you like to shift?
The death or dying part.
Okay. All right. So in one sense, death means an end. In another way, death, if we take death and we redefine it, what it means is sometimes we have to have something die in order for something else to live. I mean, that's the nature of of this whole organism that we know as our planet. That if there were no dying, there could be no birth. So I guess my question to you might be, what could be born out of that for you? I would have you imagine with me for a moment, what could be born out of that?
It's a good question. I think maybe even more freedom in some ways. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, because I think I have a certain definition of what freedom looks like, and I get that it might be completely different. Um, with a certain level of support, I, won't necessarily need to be as immersed in a larger business. Um, and um, and I could still have freedom in the sense of doing things that are joyful, helping more people, and having more abundance to be able to do more things that are fun for me to do.
So that's a big shift. That could be a significant shift in mindset for you. Now let's just examine for a quick moment what kind of emotions went into the old belief. So what is the dominant emotion in that belief, in the old belief?
Fear,
Okay. So fear is the emotion of the old belief. What emotion would you like to replace that with?
curiosity.
Curiosity. Great. Okay. Now here's what you and I are going to do. We're going to stand up in a moment. Do you know which direction west is in your office?
Let me think about that. Yes, I do. Hmm.
Okay. So I'm going to have you stand up and face the west.
Okay, I think it's here.
What I'd like you to do is repeat what I'm about to say. Spirit of the West, please take from me, and I want you to describe the emotions and the old story. So don't get to the belief yet. We'll get to the belief last. The story that you told and the emotions, please take from me this. And before I have you do this, are you willing to hang up that belief and that old story today?
Yes.
Okay. So, Spirit of the West, please take from me. Tell the story and then the emotion that was connected with it.
May I close my eyes as I do this?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Spirit of the West, please take from me this fear so that I may serve in an even bigger way. Release.
Please, sorry, there. I left out one thing. You're using negative language now. We're going to get to the positive language in a moment. This is what you're releasing to the West.
Got it. Okay.
So I want you to talk about the fear. I want you to talk about the limitations that you placed on yourself and all that inner turmoil that you had about making this decision. Everything that you want to release is going to go to the West, because we're going to turn to the East for the second part of it, and that's when you're going to bring in everything that goes along with it. Before we do this, let me tell you a quick story.
Yeah.
I had a neighbor years ago who I used to drive home, and I would see this guy sitting. He had 3 old Plymouths parked in a row in his driveway. And I would come home at 11 o'clock at night, and I would see him sitting in the driveway in his car with the interior light on, reading a book or a newspaper. Now, the 2 Plymouths behind him were stacked up with stuff up to the roof. And there was just enough room in the other Plymouth for him to sit and read. So I'm assuming that this guy was a hoarder. So this went on for a long, long time until finally, I don't know if the guy died or he had to leave, but there was the most enormous dumpster in front of that house. And then the dumpster was gone, so they got rid of it. And then the dumpster came back, filled it up again, dumpster was gone. This happened several times until they emptied out the house. Here's the point. You are that guy, and I am that guy. So everything that you want to get rid of, you're going to put in that dumpster so that you can refurnish that home the way you want it. And I hope that that metaphor makes sense for you. So when you talk to the West, whatever you want to get rid of, let's give it to the West.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Spirit of the West, take from me.
Spirit of the West, please take from me the fear, the limiting belief that if my business expands much bigger than it is today, that there will be pain, that there will be suffering. Please release that.
Are you complete?
Yes.
Is there more that you want to release?
I think it understands.
Okay. It's your dumpster. You tell me when it's full.
Yeah.
Okay. So we end with the word ometeo, which is what it literally means is 2 energies. And it has to do
Omoteo?
ometeo.
Okay.
That's the way we close that statement.
Ometeo.
Wonderful. Now turn 180 degrees so that you are facing towards the east. So now it'll be Spirit of the East, please bring to me. You're going to describe the conditions that you want in your life. You're going to describe the emotions that you want to accompany it. And you're going to describe the belief that goes along with it, what it's going to look like now that this new mindset is embodied within you.
Spirit of the East, please help me to embody the sense of ease and to trust and surrender in that which was given to me, to fulfill my most divine purpose in this life and to serve, because I know I can. Ometeo.
Oh, wait a minute. Now we got to get to the new belief.
Okay.
Please help me to install the new belief that if I expand my business, that I can have a new sense of freedom.
Okay.
And you can describe that in terms of the curiosity that you asked for as well.
Thank you. Please help me to install the new belief that if I pursue that which I believe in my heart to be my higher calling, that I can continue to experience a sense of curiosity, childlike curiosity and fun and learning and growth and freedom that I will always feel that sense of freedom and always have choice and have the help from others to help me fulfill this divine purpose.
If you're complete, oh Mateo.
Oh, Mateo.
Beautiful, Vered. I see from the look on your face, you are beaming. So something I feel shifted. I mean, you can tell me what the experience is like for you.
Yeah, I definitely something shifted, Bob. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I think number one, I feel immediately even more curiosity about what I've just learned or experienced. And there's kind of a sense of more surrender, more trust in something bigger. And I sincerely hope that what I have just experienced is helpful to the people listening so that they too can perhaps even follow the exact process that you guided me to for themselves, and just to be curious, to suspend any disbelief, to give themselves an opportunity to experience, maybe even repeatedly, and see what, if anything, shifts for them. Because I know you know that the only thing that is true is what is true for us, and what we actually, each of us, in our own body, in our own, you know, experience, know to be true. So Bob, thank you from my heart for your time today, for giving me the precious gift of your love and your wisdom and the timeless practice that you've guided me through. I'm certain it has made a difference, and I'm curious to see how it will expand even more. How can people learn more about you, about working with you, and so on?
Sure. So you can go to my website, which is www.bobvetter.com. That's V like Victor, E, T like Tom, TER.com. So Bob Vetter, VETTER.com. When you go to my website, there are some freebies along the way. There's a game that I created called Sustos. And just a quick explanation, Susto is a type of, it's described as soul loss, a piece of you, the idea that when we experience very challenging events in our life, what happens is a part of us leaves. And it's not dissimilar from an understanding of dissociation, what happens in trauma, that a part of us leaves when we are overwhelmed by something that's just too much to handle in the moment. Now, from an energetic point of view, a little piece of your vitality leaves, it stays there. And then you have another susto, and a little bit of vitality goes there. And then another one and another one. And then you wonder why don't I have the energy that I used to have? Why am I not enthusiastic about the projects and the relationships and the things that I'm doing in my life? So there are ways that we have of retrieving that part that is lost. And that's what we do very often in ceremony. But I created a game called Sustos that I based on the children's game. Did you play Chutes and Ladders as a kid?
Yes, I
Do you
do.
remember that game?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know this, but Chutes and Ladders is an ancient Hindu game that was created so that the monks could understand transformation of consciousness. So there are experiences in your life that make you go up, that you're elevated in an evolutionary conscious way. And there are things that happen that drop you down. And my thought was, Susto is like that. So I created a board game that you can download, that you can either play by yourself or with friends, where you talk about the events in your life that either gave you a chance to move up evolutionarily, or they dropped you down, and all of a sudden you experienced loss, and it took you a while to get back to who you were. So anyway, the game is fun. You actually play it with a die. You roll the die, and you have different pieces that squares that you land on with different events that happen in the 4 stages of life. So maybe things that happen to you in early childhood, things that happen to you in adolescence, in adult life, mature adult life, and eventually toward mature life toward old age. So anyway, that's available there as a free download. All of my podcast episodes from my show called Healing and Spirituality in World Cultures are there, and a million other things that we didn't have time to get to today.
Bob, with all my love, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the wonderful work that you do in our world, bringing these teachings back to life or even more to life, because there's a reason why they work and why they've lasted all these years. And so thank you.
And I send that love back to you, Vered, and to all of your listeners, everybody who has shared a little bit of their time with us today. So thank you so much.